Welcome to class. Welcome to the cell and beyond. Grab a pen and a book while we dive into the world of biology. In the last video, we defined biology. We looked at the branches of biology, and we also look at science. We defined science, and we looked at the usefulness of science in some areas. All right. So in this video, we want to look at the methods of science. Now, have you ever asked yourself how do scientists make their discoveries? Scientists in our world today, they have solved so many problems, all right? They have made series of discoveries, they've made life easier for people. And have you ever asked yourself how do they actually go about this? Their discovery. All right. Now, science, like I said, is a systematic way to explore the natural world. It's the study of living things and non-living things, or study of nature. So I want to tell you something, that in biology we follow specific methods to make discoveries, because my emphasis will just be only for biology. So there are specific methods we follow in biology to make discoveries and to make um, to solve problems. All right. Now the very first step is observation. Observation. What is observation? So I know it's a word that is not new. It's from the word to observe. Now when we say observation, now it could mean a careful and detailed watching of events or organisms. Okay, you might decide to take your time to look at a particular thing. You may even include your sense organs just to have a good knowledge of what you are looking at. For instance, observing a plant species growing faster near water. So you may look at it, what is actually making this plant grow very well? Okay, so you keep observing, you keep looking at it critically. So that is observation. Now, after observation, the next method is classification. Now, classification simply means grouping organisms or objects based on shared characteristics. Any organisms that actually look alike or have a similar characteristics, what do? We place them together. We put them in the same group. So that is classification. Now you may wonder, why do we classify animals into mammals, apes, reptiles, and the rest? So it's because they share specific characteristics together. All right. So that is classification. Now let's look at the next one. Inference. That's the next method of science. Inference. It gotten from the word to infer. And what does this mean? Now it means drawing conclusions based on observations and prior knowledge. Now you have made your observation at first, okay? And the next thing is for you to infer, to draw conclusion based on your prior knowledge. Okay, just you for instance, you are inferring that plants near water thrive well due to higher moisture. So that is your conclusion, that any plant you see around water area or around moisture, they do well, they grow well. Okay, so that is drawing conclusion based on your observation and prior knowledge. All right, so that is that about inference. Now the next method is measurement and identification. When we say measurement and identification, it means quantifying observations. Based on your observation, you quantify them, okay, and you identify organisms accurately. For instance, you may decide to measure a plant height and identifying it as a sunflower. Now, remember I told you that at first you observe a plant growing well around water. Then you might decide to measure the plant, the height of the plant after some time, after some days, okay, to know how well it has done, okay. And again, you might decide to identify that, okay, I think this flower is a sunflower, or it's hibiscus flower is this. You may decide to just identify them. Okay, so all these things has to do with the methods of science. Now another thing is hypothesis. Now what is hypothesis? Hypothesis is a testable prediction about the relationship between variables. Now, I will explain what variables are, okay? Now, when we say testable prediction, you predict, you say, okay, this is this, all right? And you said, okay, for instance, you say, if plants receive sunlight, they will grow taller. That is your prediction. You have not tested it, whether it is true or not. It might be true, it might be wrong. Okay, so it depends. All right, so it's a testable prediction. Just predict, okay, if I put fertilizer in a plant, it will grow taller. It's your prediction, but you have not tested it. So an hypothesis is open for testing. Okay, now what is variable? What is variable? In research, when we say variable, a variable in research simply refers to a person, place, thing, or phenomenon that you're trying to measure in some ways. Okay, now it could be anything, it could be a person, it could be a plant, it could be an animal, it could be anything. So far, you are trying to measure that thing. Okay, all right, so variable could be anything. So take note, variables could be anything. All right, now the next step of or the next method in science is experiment. Okay, I know that that rings a bell. Even as a new science student, you should know what experiment is. Now an experiment is a control test to check the hypothesis. Remember I told you that hypothesis is a testable prediction. You are not sure, you just said something, just predict something. Okay, now after predicting that thing, you now, okay, let me now test what I have predicted. So that takes you to experiment. Remember, you say when you expose plants to sunlight, they do well. That is your prediction. Now, you decide to experiment it by taking a plant and exposing it to sunlight. Am I making sense? So that is your experiment. So you decide to check the effect of light or sunlight on the plant. Then after you have done the experiment, then that takes us to control and conclusion. What is control? A control is a group without the experimental change. I will explain that in the next slide. Okay. And of course, conclusion to means to conclude. That is a final decision based on the experiment result. Now, for instance, you've placed a plant in sunlight, and it grew taller. Remember, you predicted that with sunlight, this plant will grow taller. And lo and behold, you tested it. You on the experiment, you placed it on the sunlight, and it grew taller. So, in other words, your hypothesis was correct. Okay? Your hypothesis was correct. So, in other words, you can actually test every hypothesis you put out there. So, hypothesis is not the final result. Why? Because it can be tested to know whether it is true or not, because there's 100% assurance that you can be very wrong until it is placed under experiment. Now I promise to explain what control is. Now when you have to conclude your result, okay, in your experiment, when conducting a result when conducting an experiment, a control is an element that remains unchanged or unaffected by other variables. Now, what do I mean? Remember, when you are when you're carrying out any experiment, you must have your major experiment and a control. Now, let me explain that. For instance, you have two plants. You label plant A, and you label the second plant B. Remember, our hypothesis was if you expose these plants to sunlight, they will grow taller. Am I making sense? Are you following me? Okay. So, so you decide to expose plant A to sunlight, and you put plant B in a shade where there is no sunlight or nothing. There's no sunlight, no light at all. After 3 days, you discover that plant B grew 7 inches taller. Okay? And plant A that you actually put inside the sunlight is 14 inches taller. Now, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? You have tested the effect of sunlight on the both plants. The only thing is that plant A was exposed to sunlight and plant B wasn't exposed to sunlight. With that, you are able to measure the effect of sunlight on both plants. Because, for instance, if you decide to put plants A and B in sunlight, tell me, how will you actually explain that sunlight makes the plant grow taller? I hope you understand that now. So when we say control, control is just your kind of experiment that is not affected by anything. Is there to help you test the effect of whatever thing you want to study, the effect of whatever thing you want to measure. For instance, it could be fertilizers, it could be sunlight. You might have two plants. One plant you decide to put fertilizer in it because you predict that, which is your hypothesis, you predict that when I had when I put fertilizer in plant A, in this plant it will grow taller. Or you may say, okay, you say when I put fertilizers in a plant, it will grow taller. That is your hypothesis. But it is not true until you have tested it. So you bring in two plants. One will serve as the experiment, while one will serve as the control. The one that serves as the experiment, you will introduce the fertilizer to it. While the one that serves as control, you will not introduce anything. You allow it grow normally, so that you'll be able to measure the effect of the fertilizers on the plant. Okay, so that is what the use of control is all about. So to measure the effect of either either fertilizer, either sunlight, depending on the effect of one thing on the variables. Okay, you remember I told that variables could be anything. It could be plant, it could be anything, it could be an animal. So in this case, we have the variables, which is the plants, which are the plants. Okay, so you are trying to measure the effect of fertilizers on the plant. And in other words, I don't want to really bother you so much because you're still new in biology. Okay, so we have two types of variable. We have the independent variable and we have the dependent variable. Okay, now the dependent variable is the one that actually change based on the effect of the independent variable. Now let me tell you, in this case, the fertilizer or the sunlight is the independent variable, while the dependent variable is the plant. Why? Because the growth of the plant is actually dependent on the effect of the sunlight or the fertilizer. I hope I'm making sense. Okay, so I hope you can differentiate between dependent variable and independent variable. So in this case, you have a plant and sunlight. So if you are asked, the two of them, you actually want to measure the growth of the plant. Also measure the effect of the sun. Both of them are variables, but one is dependent and one is independent. So which one is dependent and which one is independent variable? I just said it a while ago. The sunlight is the independent variable, okay? And the plant is the dependent variable because the growth of the plant is actually dependent on the sunlight. Okay, so I hope you understand my explanation. So after your experiment, after your control and everything, then that takes us to theory or law. So I want to tell you that hypothesis is not the same thing as a theory or law. So what is theory? What is a law? Theory is a well-supported explanation. For instance, we have theory of evolution. Now, when we say theory is an explanation someone will give based on the experiment or whatever tested hypothesis the person has undergone. Okay, so the person gives a well detailed, a well supported explanation on a particular concept. Okay, so why a law is a universally accepted statement. E.g., we have Mendel's law of segregation. Okay, remember that law well. That should be in your SS3. There is a law in biology, we call it Mendel's law of segregation, that is in genetics. Okay, so all this law, we have even laws of thermodynamics. Okay, we have the first law of thermodynamics, we have the second law of thermodynamics. All these things are law, they are universally accepted statement. So if you go anywhere in the whole world, this particular statement is universally accepted. Okay, while a theory is a well supported explanation on a particular concept. So you may decide to pick up a concept and give a detailed explanation about it. But remember, this explanation must be well supported. All right, you give your proof. Okay, especially this in mathematics, there's a lot of explanation about a particular theory of this one of that. I hope you understand that, but it is well supported because there is a proof for it. Okay, but while law is a universally accepted statement, okay, it's just a statement. It could be like 2 3 lines or 2 3 sentences, okay, to explain a particular concept. So I hope you understand that now. So let's recap. The method of sciences are observation, classification, inference, measurement and identification, hypothesis, experiment, control and conclusion. Then finally, theory or law. All right, now biologists use these methods to explore life and solve real world problems. So, whatever problems that may arise in biology, this is the method that is being used to solve these problems and to make new discoveries. Okay, now I have a question for you, and I want you to drop it for me in the comment section. Now, which method involves drawing conclusions from observation? Did you get that? Which method involves drawing conclusions from observation? So, I want your answer in the comment section. So, till I see you in the next episode, just keep watching. So, the next video, I'll be talking about the parts of microscope. So, keep watching. If you like this video, why not subscribe for more videos? Like and share. Someone needs to see this video. Thank you.